Greetings and salutations. This is the EzeeLinux show. Version 18.2, recorded January the 10th, 2018. I'm Joe Collins, and we got a lot to talk about in this show. We're going to talk about Meltdown and Spectre and how it affects Linux Mint users specifically. Also, we will talk about Fresh Mint coming along. We have the version 19 Terra has been announced. And some other things have happened in EzeeLinux land that are really cool. Did a guest spot with Bryan Lunduke. We'll talk a little bit about that. Some follow-up at the end of the video on the last video where we talked about configuring Linux Mint 18.3. And if I got time, I want to talk a little bit about Bash and Python programs for the desktop integrated terminal. So let's see how far we get, ladies and gentlemen. We'll start out with a security notice from Linux Mint, which was issued yesterday, and it talks about Meltdown and Spectre, which are the code names for two vulnerabilities that have been found in central processing units, your CPU. Meltdown affects Intel processors, Spectre affects AMD processors, and also may affect things like your video card as well, and of course Intel processors as well. And this particular vulnerability has actually been around for a very long time. It goes back to 1995 in Intel processors. It exploits a basic flaw in the design of the chip. So anybody running a computer is at risk for this vulnerability. It does not matter whether you're running Linux, Windows, Mac, whatever it is. If you have an Intel chip in there, you may have a problem. This also affects some video cards like NVIDIA. They have issued a patch for this as well. Now, on the Linux Mint site, they go into great detail about this. I'm just going to paraphrase what they say. They talk about the fact that what these vulnerabilities allow attackers to do is read data that's being processed on your computer. It doesn't modify your computer. It doesn't add a virus to your computer. They just sneak in and they can see whatever you're working on. And theoretically, they can grab passwords and they can grab personal information. So for the desktop user, the biggest vulnerability is the browser itself. Firefox has been patched, and a patch for Chrome will be coming along very, very soon. As soon as the developers figure out exactly what is the best way to try and mitigate these vulnerabilities, we're going to see all kinds of patches come in. And I ran the first round of updates on my own personal computers this morning, and it wasn't pretty. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here right now. So what Linux Mint is advising everybody to do is to make sure that you upgrade your kernel. If you are running Linux Mint 18.3 and you have automatic kernel updates on, as of yesterday you would have been running something from the 4.10 series. We are now talking about running something, they want everybody to go to 4.13, the latest 4.13, which has the patch in it. Also, if you are running NVIDIA drivers, NVIDIA has issued a patch, and that should come in automatically if your card is affected, and you will get the new NVIDIA drivers. Some people who have installed these updates have had issues with them thus far, and this also affects Ubuntu users as well. So be aware that you may run into a problem if you install these updates. You may want to hold off and wait for things to settle down. We've already had like 3 kernel updates sent down to Ubuntu in the last 3 days because of this. So the first patched kernel caused some major issues, so then they actually sent down another one. And that's just kind of the way this is. The developers are trying very quickly to figure out how to fix these problems, but in the process they might break something along the way. And there's some other things here on the page. You can definitely go and check that out. Now let's talk specifically about kernels, because a lot of folks that I talk to who have just started out with Linux Mint are really confused about kernels. Kernels can be very confusing. So let's jump over here real quick, and then I have the update manager up and running. So to manage your kernel, you will use the kernel tool in Linux Mint. And so you go to View, and then you'll see Linux kernels. And you may get a message, and here's the message here, I haven't turned it off on this machine, that tells you this is a dangerous thing to do, continue with caution. Because this is the central program that actually runs your computer. The kernel is the go-between between you and your software and the actual hardware itself. So anytime that you do anything with the kernel, you upgrade it, you change it, it might cause a problem. So proceed with caution. So if you are on the if you just installed Linux Mint and you chose not to upgrade the kernels, in other words, you chose an update policy which kept the kernel intact, then you will be running something from the 4.8 series. If you have been updating, in other words, when you installed, you chose the policy that updates everything. As of yesterday, it was on 4.10. They want us to go to 4.13, which is the latest, safest kernel. So what you would do here is you would simply choose the 4.13 kernel. I will choose this one just to show you what you get, and you get the option to install. Once it's installed, restart your computer, and you will be on version 4.13, the latest and greatest. Right now, the version that is the latest is -26. Now, as far as the old 4.10 kernels are concerned, once you have restarted, you can reopen this and then you can remove those old kernels so they don't take up space. That's how we do it in Linux Mint, so good luck with that one. I had a major problem this morning on my machine when I ran these updates. I actually could not get the NVIDIA drivers to work at all, so right now I'm using the open source NVIDIA drivers. I'm going to wait for that to shake out, and I will try and reinstall those later, or I may stay with the open source drivers depending on how much of a performance hit I actually get, because on this machine that I'm doing this video on, I have a very old NVIDIA card in the machine, which may be replaced in the not too distant future, simply because of the fact that I was having issues with the drivers. So be aware that you may have these problems. If you have set up time shift on Linux Mint 18.3, be sure that you create a snapshot before you make the changes so that you will be able to restore and get back to a previously known good working state. If you're not running that and you happen to be somebody who is running CYA, then do exactly the same thing. Make sure that you save a snapshot and that you know how to roll back and restore if you have to on either one of those programs that I've talked about on this channel. So time shift right now is a real lifesaver. If they send down a bad update, you can roll back, you can get back to a known good working state. If you want to wait for a little while to actually install these updates, that's fine by me. I think that the real risk here to desktop users from these particular security flaws is through the browser. So make sure that you install your updates when they come in for Firefox, Google Chrome, whatever browser you happen to be using. Make sure that they're installed immediately. And also, practice good common sense, safe practice on the internet. Don't go to shady websites, and if you see anything funky going on, just close the browser as quickly as possible. Get out, because that's the main avenue for getting into your system. I will mention the fact that these updates that they are sending in can reduce the performance on your computer, especially for Intel chips. This mainly affects computers that are working with big databases like servers and things like that. It's not so noticeable on the desktop. I installed the latest patch and I didn't notice a huge problem with it, but it is a bit of an issue. So I think that's probably as much as we need to talk about this. Just make sure that you install these patches at some point, and do be aware that it is out there. Beyond that, the average desktop Linux user or even Windows user or Mac user, there's not much you can do. You're going to have to wait for the developers to patch this stuff, and good luck with the updates. I hope we don't have any problems. I've already talked to 2 or 3 people who have had issues with the new NVIDIA drivers and the new kernel not working well together, and that happened to me as well. So hopefully by the time you see this video and you run your updates, that'll all be taken care of, and it will actually be okay and not be a huge problem. So, on to happier news, since we have covered Meltdown, is that Linux Mint 19 has been announced. It is going to be codenamed Terra, and it will be out sometime in May or June of this year, and it is going to be based on Ubuntu 18.04. They're not anticipating huge changes in the user experience. It will just be little updates, and of course it will be the new Ubuntu 18.04 base. We're also waiting for word on when the new LMDE 3 is going to be announced. It released, that was announced that they would start development on that, and that should be out sometime very soon here, and once it is out, I'll talk about it for sure. So that's definitely some good news. Something to look forward to, and I'm sure that by the time that Ubuntu 18.04 comes along, that a lot of these little bumps in the road that we're having problems with right now and are going to be worked out. I know that people who, Ubuntu 17.10 has not been available for download for quite some time now because there is a problem in Ubuntu with certain Acer and mainly Lenovo laptops. It trashes the BIOS. This is well known, so by the time 18.04 comes along, I think all of that will be worked out. Plus, we'll be through the process of trying to figure out how to deal with Meltdown and Spectre as well. And everybody should be fine by then. I'm telling you, man, it's been real crazy in the last couple of days dealing with that stuff. So there's really not much to talk about here. It's not going to be any huge earth-shaking changes. And, of course, I will talk about, we'll take a sneak peek at it when it comes along, and we'll follow the development here. My personal plan is to go ahead and stay with Linux Mint 18.3 until Linux Mint 19.1 is released. It seems that by then they will probably have everything all shaken out, especially since they're moving to the new LTS. So the Ubuntu folks themselves are not automatically upgrading folks who run Ubuntu 16.04 to 18.04 until 18.04.1 comes along. So I'm going to take the same approach with Linux Mint, and we'll see how it rolls. And of course, we'll talk more about that as we get up to it. I got last Wednesday, got an opportunity to be a part of the Bryan Lunduke show, and I'm going to put a link to the description for this video. It was a lot of fun. On Thursdays, he does Linux Thursday, where it's usually him and Matt Hartley. And, of course, Matt Hartley is a very good friend to the EzeeLinux project. He is the founder of Freedom Penguin, which I talk about at the end of all these videos. Well, Matt couldn't make it, so I was invited to come in and be the pinch-hitting guest. So if you want to see me on this video, then check it out. I think it came off pretty well, except for the fact that you'll notice every time I talk, I sort of bob up and down. That's because I'm sitting on a really soft couch, and I keep having to shift my position. So look, every time I open my mouth, I just go boing, boing, boing up and down. I noticed that. Probably nobody else did, and just me. Probably shouldn't have said anything about it, but it came out pretty well. It's just because I kept having to kind of move myself around. It was a lot of fun. Me and Bryan Lunduke have done some guest things in the past before, and one of my very, 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 very favorite people in the Linux community is Bryan Lunduke. And, of course, anybody who's been around Linux for a long time knows a lot about Linux Sucks, which is a presentation that he has given every year for quite some time. Last year he said he wasn't going to do the Linux Sucks presentation ever again. Well, he lied. He's going to do it this year, too. So I actually pinned him on that during the show. So fun to check out. If you're not following Bryan Lunduke, I would definitely suggest that you do. Don't agree with everything Bryan says or does, but always fun to listen to what he's got to say, and he's got the ear of a lot of very interesting people in the Linux world and talks about them and brings them on his show, so definitely something to check out. And finally, well, not finally, we've got some other stuff to talk about. XBT 2.1 is officially up on GitHub right now. These are very small little fixes that have accumulated since 2.0 was released. So if you are currently using XBT 2.0, you may want to go ahead and download this again, and then to update it, all you do is just run the installer script one more time, and it will take care of it, and it'll update everything on the system, and no big deal. I did notice that when I updated one of my local machines, that Cinnamon just gets very angry for some reason sometimes when that updater is run, or that installer. Just restart the desktop or log out and log in, and everything should be okay. I don't know why it does that. It doesn't do it on any other distribution that I tested this out on. No Ubuntu's, no problems there with Mate or GNOME or any of those desktops. XFCE is fine, just Cinnamon. But be aware of that. And thank you to everybody who's given all the really, really good feedback about XBT. And like I said, these are just little fixes, spelling errors, code boo-boos. There was a problem that if you were using XBT from a terminal, it would take your cursor away in the terminal, and if you exit it out, your cursor would be gone. That has been fixed. Most people who are using XBT are clicking on it from a menu, which is really how it was designed to run. But if you do run it in a terminal just by typing XBT, you want your cursor back when you come back, right? So that had to be addressed. So 2.1 is available, and you can download it and check it out. Go to EzeeLinux.com and go to the bash scripts page, and it's right there. And there's more information about that as well. Also, the video up there that shows you how to use it applies to 2.1. Nothing changed about the operation of the program. Just like I said, minor little fixes, and it's ready to rock and roll. So, what else do we want to talk about? Mainly some follow-up things that I wanted to do here at the end of the video, and just talk a little bit about some things that are going on in the community. First of all, I've gotten a lot of great feedback. I'm talking to a lot of wonderful people lately, helping them along, and that is been a very positive experience. And I'm going to jump ahead here on my list here because I wanted to say that I've gotten contacted by a lot of people in Europe especially who are wanting to make translations of the video content, and I have no problem with that whatsoever. None at all. You be my guest if you want to translate the content, use the video, and then put your own soundtrack on it. I have no problem with that whatsoever, as long as I get credit. And you point it back to, somewhere in the description, put EzeeLinux.com so people know where it came from. I got no problem with that. There was a fellow in Vietnam not too long ago who was reposting my videos as his own. Now, that's not cool because he was not giving me any credit, but at the same time, I don't have an issue if you want to use the content in the video and then try and come up with a different translation, make it easier for people who speak a different language to learn what's going, learn about Linux and make use of the content available. No problem there whatsoever. Quick follow-up from the last video where I was talking about setting up a static IP address. I don't know why I didn't think of this during the video, but I remember I was showing you how to use ifconfig, and I thought for some reason that ifconfig would give you the gateway, and it didn't. It doesn't show you the gateway. And I said in the video, I said, well, you can look at the configuration for your router or something like that. What I forgot is that we have the route command, and if you run route, look at that, it shows you the gateway. So if you're trying to find the gateway, there it is right there. And no, I don't have a problem with you seeing my IP addresses on my local network because you ain't getting in anyway, and it makes no difference. But here we go. There's your IP, your gateway address right there, and other information. It just totally slipped my mind when I was making the video, and of course some very nice person pointed that out. I pinned the comment up there, but if you didn't see that, that's how you get that information. Lots of networking stuff is available for Linux, that is for sure. And I guess the main thing that I wanted to kind of end the video about was I wanted to talk about where my head is going as far as programming is concerned. One of the things that I did when I created XBT 2.0 was I created the program to run in a terminal, but you fire it off from the menu, so it acts like a desktop application. Now, there are very few programs that actually do that out there in the Linux world. Usually things that run in a terminal, it's like you run it and then it does what it needs to do and it moves on and it returns you to a prompt. It doesn't stick around. So those sorts of programs don't really work very well in an environment where you want to click on them from the menu. And so when the program is written, it actually has to be written in such a way that it's going to stay in the terminal. So for instance, if I go to my menu here and then I open up XBT, you'll notice that I can work within the program. And no, I don't have a drive hooked up right now, and it'll stay open. So if I go here and then I have to actually exit the program one way or the other. So in this case, you just click 0 and then it exits. I am going to keep working on learning a bit more about how to create programs like that. And I would like to talk, or, trying to get the bug in the ear of some of the other folks out there in the community, that maybe this is a really good way to come up with durable programs, which means that if you write something for a desktop environment, GTK, Qt, whatever it is, what happens with that is that those desktop environments change, and you need a lot of have to do a lot of work keeping up with the toolkits and as they roll along. The beauty about writing a program like HTOP here that stays in a terminal from a menu is the fact that this is never going to change. The terminal is very static as far as how it works with displaying things and working with things like that. And so this is actually a really cool way to program, to come up with utilities and programs that don't need the graphic environment. It also makes it very portable. It'll work on many, many different Linux distributions. And I just think this is a really cool idea. It's just something that I actually had not put too much thought into until I started working on XPT 2.0. And I thought, this is really the way to do it. I want people to be able to click on it. I want people to be able to just use it like they'd use any other program on the system, just like HTOP here. It works exactly the same way. I'd like to see more development in that direction from people who are interested in writing in Bash and Python and other languages that run well in a terminal. And, I don't know, get a little discussion started about it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So, just wanted to put that out there at the end of this video. We'll see where that goes. If you have any thoughts on that, you can contact me at EzeeLinux.com. That's usually the best way to get my attention, is to go to EzeeLinux.com, use the contact page. Also, you can check out Facebook, of course. We have the EzeeLinux Facebook page, and lots of interesting discussions going on there all the time. Although you may see every now and again that I post something and then unpost it. I did that the other day. I posted a thing about web design. Many of the big web pages like YouTube and eBay and Facebook, they've gone through yet another round of, oh, let's update it, everything's working, but we don't care. Let's go ahead and make it look different anyway and confuse people. That's kind of the way it works, And I put a comment up there about that, and people did not get it. They thought that I was talking about the browser in Linux not working properly or something like that. I had to take it down. I was like, oh, well, never mind. They didn't understand what I was trying to say there. So, anyhow, I try and come up with things to post there that people would be interested in. And, of course, things like the Linux Mint security from the Linux Mint blog. If you're not following them, that announcement I immediately put up there. So we'll be keeping an eye on this situation and seeing how people fare through the Meltdown and Spectre crisis of 2018. Honestly, my honest opinion is that if you are an average at-home desktop user and you're not really doing much beyond some simple web browsing, and maybe if you don't go to a whole bunch of really shady sites, I'm pretty sure that you're not going to be at too much of a risk for all of this. And, of course, anytime something like this is discovered, a lot of hype comes up about it. And that is just has to do with how the developer... I mean, this is a flaw that's been in Intel chips. The Meltdown flaw has been there since 1995. And it's just now been figured out. And so there's a lot of controversy going on about that and how Intel has reacted to it and all that stuff. Don't get too caught up in the hype and don't panic. I think pretty much we're all going to be okay through this. Let's just keep our heads and keep our systems patched up, and we should be all right. Other than that, there's not a whole lot that you can do about the situation. Okay, babbled on long enough. Check out EzeeLinux on the web. Check out EzeeLinux on Facebook. Also, check out freedompenguin.com for lots of really cool stories about Linux. And you can also see these videos here and comments on the videos and everything. EzeeLinux is everywhere. Man, it's everywhere. It's taking over the world. We'll do it again soon. Thank you for watching.